Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Garnett Weber. I am one of the founders of itracks, and I'm very excited to host today's webinar, Qualitative with Millennials, Insights and Tips. We have two presenters. We have Meagan Peters with Solution Partners Consulting and Brent Beatty with itracks. So if you have questions during the webinar, we ask that you type them into the chat area at the bottom of your GoToWebinar panel, and we look forward to a question and answer session at the end of the webinar after the presentations. This is a very popular topic, one of our record number of registrants. We have over 500 people registered to join us today, and we're really excited for this presentation. First up, Meagan Peters will be presenting, and Meagan is a client of itracks and also provides moderation and consulting services for us. And Meagan has particular expertise in the area of emotional research and our topic today, millennial research. We are very excited for what you have to share with us. Go ahead, Meagan.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to talk with all of you today, and thanks itracks for partnering with me. And I'd like to start by telling you all a little bit about me so you have some context. So I actually started my career in a PhD program, and it was housed in the business department. And what was kind of great about it is I spent part of the time in the business school, but part of the time in a social psych department. So that's why I specialized in emotion research. And I got to really understand the fundamentals of attitudes, motivations, group behavior dynamics. And that's kind of the lens at which I really try and apply to all of my qualitative work. And while I loved academia and I loved conducting everything from kind of lab research and publishing, I realized I wanted to bring this to life in industry. So I left at the master's and I started to conduct qualitative research. So I do everything from IDIs, group work, to online research and work with CPGs, the makeup industry, and financial research. And then how I came to specialize with millennials happened really naturally. I'm a peer to them, and then clients kind of saw that how I design research with millennials is really different. I try and keep it in mind that what would they want? Let's apply empathy and change the design to what works best for millennials. And the good news is even though I have a peer relationship with millennials, I really believe strongly that any moderator can build a connection with millennials, just in the same way that I feel I can connect with baby boomers or I can connect with a child. But what it takes is us really just building a deep understanding of this group that we're trying to connect with. And the industry needs to work with maybe being a little bit more flexible with the methods that we're using or the techniques that we're going to apply with this group. So hopefully you guys will really get some good ideas at the end of this presentation. So kind of one of the first things is, why are millennials hard to understand? And what you're kind of seeing right here is a Wordle. So I just Googled millennials in marketing, general Google search, and I dumped the entire contents of the article into a Wordle. And what a Wordle does is it takes the highest frequency of words in the article, and the size of the words based on the frequency is put into a Wordle. So as you can see, there's so many buzzwords going on. Millennials, authentic, even taco came up. And yes, I love tacos. Clearly millennials like tacos. But as an industry, we are coming up with all of these words, but do we really understand them? Do they have meaning? I think we're so quick to share these buzzwords, but not really step back and have a strong application for them. Clearly, we need to build a sense of trust, but there needs to be a deeper level to this, especially when conducting any form of research with them. Also, with kind of working with clients and millennials in general, why should we care about them? Well, the number one is it is clear that millennials have a lot of money. There's a strong place for them in the marketplace. And then millennials are influencers. They influence each other. They have a strong media presence. This is kind of something that most of us just inherently know. But what's also interesting is millennials are influencing even baby boomers. Millennials are gravitating towards cities. They're staying in cities. And then we're seeing millennials are influencing their baby boomer parents in the same way. Baby boomer parents are selling their suburban homes and moving to cities. And what's also interesting, they're influencing people below them. So millennials are all about these dating apps. You hear about Tinder, you hear about swiping. So what's also kind of crazy is now high schoolers, college students, everyone is on these dating apps. So it's so important as marketers to understand what's going on with millennials. And I think that's something we really, really need to stress. So what's also interesting is best practices for millennials apply to other generations. So millennials get a lot of bad rap. The number one that we kind of hear is they have terrible attention spans. And it's almost laughable. But if we really step back and go, let's try and fix that. Let's try and accommodate it. So my favorite is, I wanted this presentation to be 30 minutes instead of an hour. That's something a millennial would love. But I think actually everyone likes it because you get to get back to your work faster. You get back to your day faster. We all have crazy days. Let's really respect everyone's time. And I think that's something that I try to put it in the minds of a millennial, but everyone can benefit for it. So another millennial stereotype is that there are these snowflakes that, that we need to constantly cater to them. We kind of make them sound like these terrible beasts in research, that they're so difficult and these just terrible things. But we really need to step back and establish that I think really they want to be understood. And the mindset that we should try and establish for ourselves is empathy. It's a sense of emotional intelligence. And when we create that shift in research, we're going to be in a better place. Even though at times it's probably frustrating. It's frustrating for the client, and it can sometimes be frustrating for the moderator because it's different. And it is an adjustment. And so even though sometimes we may be feeling like, oh my God, there are these little beasts that we're just having to constantly accommodate for, instead if you shift it to they want you to understand them as much as you are needing to understand them. So it's really creating this industry shift of not getting frustrated and employing empathy and emotional intelligence. And I think internally we all know that's what we need to do, but it's just constantly reminding ourselves that if we try and understand them and know that they want you to understand them, we're really going to get better results. We're going to get better insights. And we need to start this in how we're designing the research right off the bat. Not just how we're conducting it and interacting, but the very design of the research. So how do we create this win in the research design? I think one of the first principles is just be flexible. So if you're conducting any form of qualitative research or even quantitative, if you know it's not going well, in qualitative, if you read the audience, if you know they're not really responding or you catch the emotional tone, change it up. Say, oh, I know you guys aren't really liking this. Let's do this now. Also, make it fun. Millennials are fun. They're adventuresome. They like experiences. So just be open to new ideas. Think about the games that are popular, like Cards Against Humanity. Think of different cool word exercises. Be open to just completely doing it new. Also, keep it quick. So maybe even if a focus group is 2 hours, make it an hour and a half. It's kind of changing those old ways of doing things to making it shorter and really respecting people's time. Also, the use of technology goes over really well in this group. It's natural for us. Texting, loading pictures, showing you with our phones. That's a great way to get really expressive results with millennials. Also, make it social. Millennials, you may think that we're not social, but we just express ourselves socially in a different way. Instagram is social. Facebook is social. Technology allows millennials to be social and connected. We are constantly texting each other. we're highly connected. And so if you as a moderator allow people to interact with each other, you're going to get amazing data. So also understanding values and emotions. This will allow you to kind of dig a little bit deeper. Sometimes getting the value profile will help you get what you want out of millennials and the emotions. So for instance, millennials are not motivated by money. So incentives may not always be the best way to motivate people. And understanding that that's not an instant sense of control will help you get there. So maybe you as the moderator have to be the source of inspiration and understanding their needs. Also triggering how can I get there through their emotions. All right, what to stay clear of if you don't want to lose people. Millennials are a little bit tricky here in that if you don't maintain their attention or their respect, you can lose them. And this is even as a brand in marketing. And often we're here to help brands understand not to lose people themselves. So one high-level thought that I think helps remind brands and even researchers is, for the love of God, leave me a message. Or don't leave me a message. Whoops there. For the love of God, don't leave me a message. Just text me. And so what I mean by this is kind of one of those millennial crimes you don't ever want to commit. You don't ever want to leave a millennial a message. This creates instant frustration. It's something that millennials just hate. This kind of gets at what I would say millennial respect. You're not respecting a millennial's time, and you're not understanding them. And it makes them instantly frustrated. So with millennials, this kind of concept of respect is something moderators need to understand right away, and companies need to understand right away. You need to operate in a sense of millennial time. They value their time so tightly that we need to figure out how to accommodate their schedules. Sometimes this can be through online platforms and just being creative with it. And we don't want to frustrate them. And sometimes figuring out those emotional triggers of what is frustrating can be very, very helpful. Another big kind of thing that we need to figure out as an industry is traditional sources of motivation, they aren't enough. Always think about millennial social values if you need inspiration. So what I would like as an industry is for us to kind of move towards a place of R&D. So money is not a millennial source of motivation. And think about this in terms of jobs. Money used to always be kind of, let's pay someone a good salary, and that's going to get someone to perform well. Well, millennials are preferring jobs that offer flexibility, vacation time, a great environment, bosses that are inspirational. And when we think of companies that they align with, it's companies like Tom's, a shoe for a shoe, some that offer great social values and benefits, and companies that are seen as generous, versus companies like Uber who don't align with what they care about. So in terms of research, maybe our incentives need to be a little bit of financial incentive and then donating some money to a charity that millennials care about. We need to be creative and become more inspirational, or also offer things that they care about, like a raffle to tickets or a pool to win a piece of technology that they really like. We need to start caring about what they care about. Also, they care about travel. Maybe we need to offer them a raffle for travel. We need to get outside the box of money. So another big thing that we need to, I think, get to is tell me why I'm doing this. Sometimes as researchers, I think we're moving people through a process. We're very much, okay, why do you like this? Tell me why you don't like this. But I think we need to inform millennials of a bigger process because they tend to be very hesitant and a little bit reticent of why they're even doing something in the first place. So if we tell people the purpose of why we have them there in the first place, you are here to help me do X, Y, and Z. And if you do this, we as a company will have a better understanding. So giving them the respect as a research participant of what they're doing is helpful. And I think this is kind of taking things to a higher level of almost participant respect and why they're doing this. And this is kind of a psychological concept that I like to apply with millennials called power versus status. So if you think of power versus status, a police officer always has power. Status is something that you earn through likability. And like Taylor Swift has some pretty awesome status. People just love Taylor Swift. And because of her likability, people will do things for Taylor Swift. The police officer that has so much power, people might do what the police officer wants, but it's more fear-based, it's more title-based. I think in research, when moderators really establish a likability, a more status-based willingness from their participants, they're going to get a lot further. And that's something that a peer can sometimes get a little bit better, but you can establish it as a moderator. If you inform them why they're doing this, why they should care about it, if you bring in fun, if you bring in activities that matter to them, you're going to build status credibility versus power credibility. And that's why if we think they should do something based on money, that's more power-based. And so if you move it and start to shift as an industry of status, that's going to play better with a millennial because that's the currency that they're operating on. Power is no longer the point that they need to think about. So I want us to push and go, how can I earn status with my millennial research participants? All right, another thing that I really think is going to get us far is look at what millennials are currently loving and what's trending and design your research accordingly. So I think a lot of us do try and follow the trend, but we need to really pull this into our research because we're going to have more meaningful data. So one thing that I personally like to use a lot is music. So for instance, I do a lot of CPG work. I like to say, well, what type of music do you see this person who is using this, for instance, granola bar, what type of music would they listen to? And then I would like to ask, what type of music do you listen to? I think that blends really nicely a little bit of culture and then personal research. So then you can kind of test, is this fitting into what's popular? Is this falling into what my participant is listening to? And you can get as creative as you want with those types of questions. And it blends really nicely, and they find it very fun. So emotions, I believe very strongly, are the key to unlocking a lot of information. There's so much that it really can tell you about behaviors and attitudes. And I actually conducted a financial study on financial patterns in millennials. What are they spending? A lot of their motivation. And there's a concept called emotional ambivalence. And what emotional ambivalence is, it's when someone feels two emotions simultaneously from two different emotional dimensions. And what an emotional dimension is, it's from two different planes, like a positive plane and a negative plane. So, for example, if you feel angry and happy, which that would be from a positive and negative at the same time simultaneously. That's a difficult emotional state. So one of the most common emotional ambivalence examples is imagine a parent at a wedding. They feel emotionally ambivalent because their child is going to get married. They're so happy about it, but at the same time they might feel a little sad, like they're losing their child. So emotional ambivalence is not the most common emotional experience, but it happens. And we know psychologically that if someone's feeling emotionally ambivalent, it has a bunch of outcomes from psychological research. So when I interviewed these millennials about their spending habits, in some ways we saw a lot of positive emotions. They love to spend their money on food. They love to have lavish activities like going to get their nails done and have traveling, and those were very happy emotions that were experienced during that time. And then, however, there were all of these negative emotions: fear of debt, fear of future spending. There was a lot of career anxiety. And there was also some negative frustration that they're not earning what they felt like they should. So what happened is when you have these two different dimension emotions at the same time, this emotional ambivalence leads to uncertainty. It leads to almost a sense of internal conflict. And people try and resolve that internally. And then these cool outcomes happen. So one of them is actually creativity, because you want to get rid of this emotional sensation. And then we see this in millennial behaviors. The creativity has allowed millennials to start their own businesses. They want to solve their emotional problems. They come up with really cool apps. They come up with really cool ways to solve and save their money. And think of Groupon. Think of all these amazing startups. And I would attribute this to emotional ambivalence. It's constantly having to deal with the conflict of two competing emotions. So this is just an example of how sometimes knowing the emotional environment that's happening within millennials can really provide you unbelievable insights. So kind of little summarizing and extra millennial tips and tricks. Always be creative and be as creative as possible. It'll really help you go further. Swag is a little reminder that I think that's just going to help everyone. Swag is a sense of style, a sense of coolness, and also it can be literally some type of material good. Offer that as an incentive. Think of tickets. Think of an extra piece of technology. Think of just another way to motivate millennials, because I really think just a financial incentive is sometimes not enough. Also, I think using a millennial or getting one to just sound check you, bounce ideas around, can sometimes be really helpful. Also, with all qualitative, sometimes paring back what you are testing is the answer. Quality, not quantity. And I know this is really painful to do. It's just hard to get your clients to do it, and it's hard to do it, but especially with millennials, I think this is really, really important to do, because you can really lose your audience. Also, take into account the emotional experience. Millennials have been brought up in such an emotional time, and they react very emotionally to the surroundings, I think even more so than other generations. So it's something that really needs to be looked at in the research and how you approach the research. Lastly, I think what always helps is to run through these questions when you're conducting research yourself. Number one, would I want to participate in this research study? If no, if you really don't want to do it yourself, change it and make it more fun. The other one is everyone prepared with a backup plan, because if you get into it and you're like, no one's really feeling this, the vibe is just not good, switch to another plan. Number three, are we mindful of the time? Are we really showing that respect in the participants' time? Fourth, are we targeting the right millennial? Kind of like any really large group, they're not all the same. There are hipsters, there are hippies, there are moms. It's just something to kind of gut check yourself a little bit. And then, is this research designed at every point considering who we are trying to predict, learn from, and gain insights from? So thank you guys so much for listening to me. I love any type of feedback or questions, so always feel free to shoot me an email if you want to hear more or dialogue about anything.
Great, thank you so much, Megan. Next up, building on Megan's point of using technology for millennial research, we have Brent Beatty, corporate account executive of itracks, sharing some tips and tricks and suggestions for leveraging technology for millennial research. Go ahead, Brent.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So I just wanted to start off and mention here and say, Megan, I thought your points were really great, and I loved your presentation. Thanks so much for joining us today here too. Where I wanted to start, and I'll keep my presentation rather brief here so we have some time for questions for Megan and myself as well, but it's talking a little bit more about the design and preparation phase for online qualitative research. And my experience really lies in helping our clients, similar to Megan, researchers, moderators, even end user clients, kind of take their research objectives and take their research plans and move them into an online environment and pick the methodology or piece of technology for online qualitative that will allow them to collect their data and even allow them to target individuals like millennials more effectively and get better data from them. And I think we can all agree, based on what Meagan said, that spending a little more time developing and designing your research plan when targeting millennials can be very useful and is almost very important as well. And I have a lot of clients that come my way and say, we've decided on a methodology, we've decided on a research plan, here's what I'm thinking for questions, how much will this cost, and how quickly can we move forward. And I wanted to mention here as kind of a tip or trick, spend more time preparing for your research, and even come talk to people like our account executives here at itracks or people from other providers and get recommendations on methodologies and different technologies that are available to you, maybe even before you start writing your research plan or before you start developing a discussion guide or a set of questions. Because knowing some of those tools, knowing the different things that you have available in your market research toolkit can be very effective in helping you kind of tailor and adjust your research plan and your questions to the demographic or group that you're targeting, like millennials here as well. So my first point that I just wanted to mention, just compare methodologies, different question or activity types that are available to you. And then after that point, tailor them to that millennial demographic instead of kind of working the other way around and deciding on the methodology and making a plan before you've come to someone like itracks or your preferred provider as well. I want to go back here quickly to one of Meagan's first slides, and she talked about how to reach millennials and create a win when you're doing qualitative research online. And she made 6 really valuable points here, and what I want to touch on is each of these points individually and just talk about different pieces of technology that are available to you that can help you do these things. So how do we keep our research quick? How do we make it more fun and flexible? How can we utilize technology, make it social, and how can we use online qualitative tools that are offered here at itracks to understand the values and emotions of millennials, make our research more successful? And I wanted to today highlight 3 different pieces of technology that we offer here at itracks. And the first that I'll talk about briefly is our mobile application, or itracks Mobile. And that kind of ties into the asynchronous research tool that we have here at itracks as well, called itracks Board. And for this point, I want to say use this technology and use these 2 pieces to make it very social, interactive, and engaging for participants as well. And for that reason, I've also included video here that I want to touch on today too. And all of these pieces combine into one really easy-to-use research tool that we call itracks Board. But when Meagan mentions those 6 points that we talked about earlier, using technology effectively, making it more fun, keeping it quick, the mobile application piece and also the video data collection piece can really help you do this as well. So just keep that in mind, using different tools and using them effectively to target that group, or I guess collect data from different millennials can be very useful. Leverage things like mobile applications that millennials are very comfortable using. Leverage things like mobile applications that can make it easy and very quick for millennials to provide insights, even in places where they may not have been able to before. So, you're walking around a store with your mobile phone and you can ask participants in qualitative research studies to snap a quick picture or take a quick video of their experience. It does make it a lot more engaging, it makes it more social, and we can effectively utilize technology with these 3 tools to take our research one step further and collect better data from your participants as well. So I'll talk about each of these points individually here, but how do we make the research more fun, and how do we encourage engagement among this millennial target using our mobile application or using these 3 tools? So a couple of things to mention is that mobile devices can be very handy in letting you collect different types of data. So not only simple text responses from participants, but videos, images, pictures. It really can make your research study or the experience for participants more fun. It allows you to kind of tap in or view different parts of their lives from a more ethnographic view as well. But also in terms of engagement and keeping these millennials, I guess I'm excited to take part in your study. The mobile application lets you send things like push notifications or has some features built into it that will allow you to keep those millennials more engaged and remind them to log back in, and even allow you as the researcher to more effectively use their time by sending out notifications and alerts saying, hey, I want you to put in your answer for today, log in now, or when you have a second or you have a chance. And I mentioned this earlier as well, but use interesting activities to make it more fun and encourage engagement among participants. Just thinking about our itracks board application or our asynchronous research platform, asking for video and picture responses are great, but you can even use some more advanced exercises or interesting activities like an iMarket activity where you're displaying different concepts and there's a bit more of a gamified experience for participants to mark it up. Or even some different exercises like sorting, ranking, media uploads, ask participants to go out onto the internet and grab some pictures to help back up what they're saying as well will definitely help make the research study more fun and make the activities a bit more interesting for millennials to complete. Meagan said a lot about this, and she talked a lot about emotion and trying to gauge the emotion of participants, maybe even matching their emotion and understanding the unique emotional perspective of millennials. And for this reason, I wanted to kind of call out video data collection and qualitative research online as well. I don't think it's ever been easier for us to collect video data from any target using online qualitative tools, but especially millennials. They're very comfortable with the technology to upload video. They all have mobile phones. And we can really effectively use the video data that we collected to help gauge the emotion of respondents, to watch their behaviors. We can even use video as a moderator, from a moderator's perspective, to pose the questions and try and form a deeper connection with respondents. Right within a board or a research study online. Also, that video piece lets you gauge in-the-moment responses from participants. So if they're out in a grocery store or at a restaurant, we can effectively use this video piece, to gauge their emotion and get more in-depth information from them using that video tool whenever and wherever we want. So keep that in mind. Video is a very effective tool to engage millennials, but also help us gauge their emotions and do a little bit of a deeper dive within your qualitative research as well. Meagan touched on this as well too, and I want to talk a little bit about it. She said be flexible in your research, change your tactics if they're not working, but also move forward quickly and even make those changes quickly. And I think a tool that comes to mind that lets you be very flexible and adjust your research tactics and kind of change things up is our itracks board application, or something similar from another provider works great as well. In terms of being quick, you can launch studies very easily and effectively using tools many companies offer. We call it integration here at itracks, but you can move respondents forward from an online screener survey and engage them immediately. Which allows not only a lot of flexibility in your study if you need to change tactics up or kind of adjust your plan, but it also lets you conduct research very, very quickly. Within a board study, in terms of flexibility, you can really pose as few or as many activities as you need. So that way, if after day one you're not getting the data that you need as well, you can change up your tactics and adjust your plan for day two, change things on the fly, even segment participants and engage some people that you found to be less active or more active in different ways. And yeah, I just think board is a very effective way and allows a lot of flexibility, but also a lot of, or also allows you to be very quick with your online qualitative research as well, which lends itself great to this millennial target too.
So I have a number of questions that have been submitted through the webinar text chat, so feel free to add more. So first up, we have a question here. Meagan, is it easier or more difficult to get millennials to interact with each other in an online board? What are some tips and tricks to get this group engaged with each other and not just the moderator?
I think ask them directly to interact with each other and definitely remind them that's what you want. And I think if you start off by kind of facilitating it in an online setting, they'll follow suit. So I think if you show high energy and saying their names and saying, Casey, what did you think of Daniel's post? Then you can kind of start to facilitate it. But I think you can really get high interaction online and face-to-face. It's just really you setting the tone as a moderator and facilitating it, and then they'll really start doing it.
Great, thank you. This is a fun question. So regarding your comment about Taylor Swift, earning status through likability. Is likability more important than talent or accomplishment?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think with millennials, it's depending on what you're wanting. Millennials are very quality focused, so they're going to not accept it if it's bad quality, but it does still have to be likable. So it's not really an or, it's an and. You can't not be good quality. It's kind of going to link up, but you do still have to be likable because it's going to carry a lot of weight. And I think that's where some people think they can get by without the likability. And so I hope that still answers your question. I think the likability may be a higher order than it has ever been in the past.
Great, thanks. All right. Can you share more about the emotional context? How do we researchers do this?
I think there are a lot of different ways. I think we need to tap into our psychological backgrounds. I think we can use, one way that I do it, honestly, is I have a facial and body language background. So that one takes years of experience. So I literally do read people's body language, and I have facial coding background. But if you haven't kind of spent the years in grad school with that, I think you can apply different psychological methods. So asking people what their emotions are is kind of a basic level, but it doesn't tap into the subconscious. But also looking at what do they like to do emotionally, or having them work with pictures, having them do an analogy. Those are kind of the surface level ones, but definitely one area that just is my emotional expertise is kind of the body language and facial background. But it's really just kind of looking towards psychology and saying what are the methods that we can kind of use that get into that layer. Are we doing self-report, which is one, and I would say any form of emotion research is good, but level one is self-report, asking them, how do you feel about this? Because that's great. Or are we doing level two and getting the subconscious?
Thanks. How do we ensure that the user test results are genuine and authentic when the millennial is aware they're being studied?
I think that's any type of research, and I think the genuine aspect is using the video camera and interviewing them. You can pull them in for a little bit of a session, and you should be able, as a moderator, to kind of gauge emotionally, do they really seem authentic? Are they engaged? I don't think millennials are really in there to trick you, but if you pull them in for an interview and they seem disingenuous, then that's something to be concerned about. But I don't think the likelihood is that high, but that should be something, if you feel someone is not giving you the right answers, pull them in for a chat.
Great. We understand that authenticity is important to millennials. How does this impact marketing and or brand reputation research? Are they skeptical of brands that are trying to connect with them? Are they a bit cynical about brands that are trying to promote their products and services and conduct research in this area?
I think that's with going back to the respect concept. You need to be upfront with it. I think it's not about being suspicious of conducting research, but it's about providing the why and giving them the background. It's not trying to trick them about the taste test or trick them about the advertising, but saying, you know, we're doing this because we genuinely care. We care about your opinions, and we want to make this better because of you. Not that we're trying to be tricky or sneaky. It's actually, it feels tricky and sneaky when you don't provide them that information. And millennials can be a little bit apprehensive because sometimes people don't provide all of that information and provide the insurance. And it's almost like one of my personal pet peeves is when products when people test products with millennials, but then they don't give them the nutrition information, then they'll ask about it and you'll say, oh, I don't have it. So sometimes when you go into a study, make sure you have all the information for the millennials because they crave the information. So it's really about giving them the information that they want. Give them the why and know it going into it.
Sure. Does millennial body language differ from other age groups?
No. People's body language it's pretty consistent. It can vary much more by culture. So depending on where you're raised, I think gestures can vary, but gestures are a little bit different than body language, just like language can be a little bit different. But facial expressions are the same, but traditional body language is not different.
Great. I understand how to read or capture emotions, but it sounded like there's something about the setup, the context for research that is important, or you might accidentally turn them off. How do you prepare ahead of time for this?
I think it's also having that backup plan because you sometimes don't know what will turn them off. It's almost preparing for the unexpected. And it's also the time thing. So I work with so many millennials. I know that not giving them the nutrition information is going to frustrate them because they're going to ask for it. So there's some things that through experience you can predict ahead of time and tell the clients if you're going to test food, make sure you have that ahead of time. But there's some things you just can't plan for, and that's being able to have that predictive backup plan. And I think that's the main thing to having your toolbox when working with millennials is just being so flexible.
Great suggestion. What other methods, other than asking about emotions and rating images, or talking about how they make them feel, are there other techniques that get to the unconscious?
Those, I have a lot that are unfortunately proprietary to me. So another time, but I think that's something our industry really needs to kind of work on and is something that really is important to millennials.
Mm-hmm. Great suggestion. Okay. And we're running close to the end. We'll maybe have time for one more here. It's more of a scenario. We have a Gen Xer researcher about to interview millennial moms for in-person research, and they're looking at typically interviewing 45 minutes and have a combination of question and answer and projective exercises. Do you recommend with millennials to shorten it to 30 minutes?
I think 45 minutes is okay. I think 30 is always better. And that's what's kind of the interesting thing. 30 is great. 45 is okay. I love 30 minutes with it just because there's something so digestible about 30 minutes. But I don't think 40 would scare me. Or, sorry, 45 would scare me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And any suggestions for resources for those looking to expand their knowledge in emotional research and millennial research?
Millennial research, I think getting experience with millennials, I think that's really the best. I think interacting with them, I think spending time with them, I think actually they are your best resource. I think sometimes reading about them can be a little bit stiff, and the more time you spend with them and are truly open with them, they're going to give you the answer. With emotion research, I think academia is actually your best resource because you want to get as close to the science as possible, and that's really what gave me my foundation. So going really into a program or going to a neuroscience conference and ones that are as close to the I think our marketing research industry is certainly an option, but I really like speakers that have an academic background. So I will actually speak about some emotion-based topics and look for speakers that have more of an academic tie, and that's what I really look for as a way to learn and look at methods.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. We have gone over today just a very, very popular topic. We really appreciate everybody joining in today, and thank you so much to Meagan for the wonderful presentation, and Brent for sharing the ideas for technology with millennials. Thanks, everyone. And as I mentioned, if you're interested in the next webinar on the technology feature of time selection and being flexible around the interview times, feel free to go to our website, www.itracks.com. And Meagan's contact information has been provided if you'd like to continue the discussion and continue to engage on research in this area. Feel free to contact her. Thanks, everyone.